microphone on, please.
Sorry about that. Me noa tātou, e tō mātou mātua I te rangi, e whakawhetai ana mātou mōna manakitanga mai o mātou, kua tai mai nei ki tēnei hui, āmene.
Kia ora, Rob. Just to let you know, of course, that this meeting in the virtual meeting room is being recorded, and we are being live streamed onto the Whangarei District Council Facebook page. After the meeting, the recording of this meeting will also be accessible via Facebook and from our own Whangarei District Council website. Councillors, you would have received supplementary report item 5.5, the adoption of the consultation document and supporting information for our 2020-21 annual plan. It was issued separate to the agenda and within our legislative timeframe. I will be taking that item 5.5 after item 5.3, the fees and charges adoption, so just before item 5.4, the long-term plan. There's also a minor correction required, but I'll outline that when we get to item 5.5. Councillors, a reminder, of course, that if you have any declarations of interest for any of the items, please indicate that prior to the meeting, to the agenda item beginning. There are no apologies. We have everybody present and accounted for, which is fabulous. So item 4.1 are the minutes of our meeting, which was held on Thursday, the 30th of April in the virtual meeting room. We've had Councillor Hulse ask that there's a slight amendment to indicate that his presence, he was late due to technical issues, so we'll make sure that those are amended and correctly recorded. So Councillor Cockerillo's got his finger up. He's moving that those minutes are a true and correct record. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Peters is seconding. So any other corrections or amendments required? I will put that motion. Those in favour, please raise your hands. And pens. Thank you. That's carried. We move to item 5.1 is the COVID-19 response strategy. We have a recommendation. Councillor Innes is going to be moving the recommendations that the Council, I will read it out just so that it's a record for people who don't have the agenda in front of them, maybe, for our visitors. That the Council, 1, endorses the COVID-19 response strategy in attachment 1, and 2, authorises the Chief Executive to make any minor amendments to the text and graphics of the COVID-19 response strategy as required. So Councillor Innes has moved that. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Reid has seconded that. Councillor Innes, over to you. Microphone, please, Councillor Innes.
Right. The first point that I would like to make really is the appreciation really of staff and being able to assist us facilitate the strategy at short notice. They're extraordinary situation that we're in, and we now have what I consider a very robust strategy going forward. The strategy looks at the impacts of COVID-19 across our sectors and our economy. It underpins the way that the Council and the organisation will take its business going forward. So I see that it addresses our organisational culture, and it's one that we look at it within a framework within the strategy of restart, recovery and reset. So it's an acknowledgement that going forward, we look at our culture and we look at undertaking our business in a way that is different from prior COVID-19. And when I have a look at the agenda today, we have the relief package, $3 million, We have the annual plan, the consultation document. We look at the long-term plan and look at a change in vision there. So I see that the strategy really underpins what our business is today, and it will continue on that way. It looks at a variety of tools that Council can use to influence the development of Whangarei District. And in doing that, I see that we're going to be more inclusive in what we do, looking out with partnerships with others, central government, business and community, really looking towards being more resilient and sustainable as a community. And I think that COVID-19 has really taught us that as a council, we need to be a lot more resilient and sustainable. Although I do acknowledge the fact that staff have been able to work from home, something that we thought would not be possible 2 months ago. So my hope really is with this strategy, it really provides a good basis for us to go forward. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Innes. Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Deeming, I see Councillor Peters, so I'll start with Councillor Deeming.
I've been really impressed with the speed that the staff have been able to respond to the immediate needs of COVID-19, and the work that's gone into this is just admirable. There's no doubt that COVID-19 has helped to sharpen our view of what's really important, and also to allow us to appreciate the preparedness that our council the state our council was already in, with the debt headroom, the ability for us to quickly move to working from home. I think most councillors found it an extraordinarily difficult thing to do, but within a few days we had adapted to that thanks to the expertise of our staff that helped us do that. So overall, I'm just really impressed with the way the staff have handled this, and the way councillors have responded too, actually. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Deeming. Councillor Peters.
I also am impressed with this. I think it's really good. I am excited with all the data that's been brought together. I had a question on page 25 about the total number of people who had already lost or projected to lose their jobs. And I wondered, because the figure 3,490 total was very similar to the total amount of people that have lost their jobs, 3,400 for the whole of Tai Tukuto, whether that is just for the Whangarei area, or whether that's whether it's fusing those two figures, and what time frame they think this is going to happen. Because the people that I've been talking to, some of the businesses they've held on to now, but, they're going to be laying off staff. The second thing that's one question. And the second thing was, I notice when we talk about the partnerships that we have, I notice community and community groups aren't mentioned as partnerships. Partnerships don't necessarily mean money is going into things, but we really need to acknowledge that, as well as other other types of agencies, that is one that needs to be acknowledged. Also, acknowledging the potential partnership, and hopefully this will be also in reality with the Northern District Health Board. Thank you very much for the work. I think it's really impressive.
Thank you, Councillor Peters. If you just will note that the data came from the Infometrics report, and it was specifically for Whangarei, and of course that will be reviewed regularly. So that's a moment in time, I guess you could say. But also, I really take on board the comments that you've made around partnerships with other agencies. So thank you for that. Any others?
Sorry,
Councillor Peters?
So moment in time, does that mean that this is to date, or it is what time frame is actually are these informatics from? That was my point.
So I'll hand over to Rob for that response.
Thank you, Your Worship. So these figures are out of date already, probably. Those figures that you were talking about, Councillor, came from the Infometrics report that I passed you about 10 days ago, maybe. But things are moving so quickly that they'll almost certainly be out of date by now. So no one's really sure. I think what we should take from this is it's a large number.
Thank you, Rob. I see Councillor Cooper and then Councillor Hulse. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I've just really got a question for the staff, and I appreciate the report. Thank you very much. On bullet point 3 on page 14, it says focus on medium long-term actions, i.e. advocate for central government investment in key projects. Could I ask, please, what that advocacy looks like, and are we have we involved our local MPs to try and further our cause district, and if we, just what it looks like going forward, please.
Thank you, Ken. You were wanting to refer that to Rob, so I'll pass it on to Rob.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We've been working with officials rather than elected MPs and ministers at this point, partly because obviously the government ones are around and in their bubbles and difficult to get to and as busy as they can be, and I think the opposition ones are in a similar sort of a space. So as we come out of this, I'm sure we will spend more time, probably through the Mayor and other elected members, working with ministers and MPs. But at this stage, we've been just working with officials.
Thank you, Rob. And I can confirm that we do, as mayors, have conversations with MPs, and clearly the Big Five comes through in our conversations, but that's not necessarily a council sanctioned action, but we certainly are promoting those when we're in conversations with our MPs. So I saw Councillor Hulse, then Martin and Murphy.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I'd just like to, it's a very good report. I just want to say thank you for everyone who's involved, but don't forget the council's input right from the start, and I think the councillors weren't too far apart on what we were trying to achieve here. There's right through this document, there's several references to whānau Maori, and particularly from our government. And I think it's with urgency we need to get our participation up with Maori and our local council. We're all set to go and it's deferred, but I think we need to put a bit of haste into getting that committee up and running. I think there's advantages there right across the board that we should be taking the opportunity now to actually link in with the other partners indicated in this report. So I think we've got a bit more work to do, and I look forward to it. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Hulse. Councillor Martin.
Yes, I'm going to take a bit of licence here, but and a positive comment. We've got a response to the COVID, but let's not forget that our infrastructure was well maintained and operative throughout the whole process. The staff had everything planned quickly, put it into place, and we've now got something very solid to build on. Everybody's being kept safe and everything is running, and our district is in a very good position with regards to the ongoing maintenance and use of its infrastructure. So I think we should, at this stage, acknowledge the work that was done by those staff at all hours and under very difficult circumstances to make sure that we've got a solid platform to proceed with the assistance that we're giving in this COVID-19 response.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Murphy.
Thank you. Yes, I also would like to endorse the framework. I think it's very well set out, and I like that staff acknowledge in it that the different stages between restart, recovery and reset, it's not necessarily a linear framework, that we have to think about how we can look at each of those stages simultaneously. So, for example, even in the first stage, restart, we need to be looking at ways we can reset, for example, through procurement, through relationship building, and to just generate that greater resilience in our community. So I think the framework's a great start, and I look forward to the more detailed action plan, which we'll see soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. Councillor Cutforth.
Thank you, Your Worship. I agree that staff have turned this around in an incredibly short length of time, and I really do appreciate the work that's gone into it. I note that a lot of the information has come from Infometrics, which are, a large economic development consulting firm, amongst many other things that they do. And I think one of the difficulties with this document is that places like Infometrics basically use a cookie cutter approach to the work that they do, right? I have read another report done by Infometrics for another district, which reads remarkably similarly in terms of the way that it's done. And so while I think it's great to have all this information in one place, I think we do need to be careful that we read it carefully and we read it with a critical eye, which is what I have done. So it's no reflection on the staff, okay? But there are some, and the other thing is because it's a cookie cutter, because it takes information and, useful information, plunks it all in one place in a cookie cutter format, it's really important that documents like this are informed by local intelligence, and that local intelligence comes through in the documents. Otherwise, we are left with information which can be quite blunt edge, I guess. And I'll just use an example, and I'm using the page numbers at the top of the pages, okay, just to not confuse everybody. So as an example, if you look at page 21, which is the snapshot of Whangarei in 2019, okay, so 2019. In the GDP by key industries, tourism and hospitality doesn't even figure, okay? And the figure for manufacturing, which is 551 million GDP, how does that compare, to the figure on page 35, top page 35, where we're saying manufacturing contributes 960.4 million to our GDP, so almost twice what the figure is. So throughout the report, there are anomalies like that. And while we can go, oh, that's just somebody being fiddly and critical, it's actually quite important, and particularly with tourism. In fact, tourism, we can see in this document, actually contributes, domestic tourism doesn't contribute a great deal to our economy. One of the things that doesn't come through in this report, which I think is really important, is retail. There's a couple of mentions to it, but there's actually not a big mention about retail. And retail is actually, I think, if you go by local intelligence, one of the sectors that's going to be hugely impacted in our city. And I'm concerned that because we didn't input any local intelligence really into the report, we're missing some of that nuance. On page 25 again, top of page 25, it looks at some of the areas that are going to drop in employment, and it looks at transport, postal and warehousing. Well, I think if you read other local information, you see that things like courier, that type of industry is hugely expanding, actually. That part of the transport industry is hugely expanding. That's going to create quite a lot of employment for people in our town. Ditto, the next section down, information, media and telecommunications, saying it's going to decrease. Well, I would have thought e-commerce and the stuff I've seen happening in Whangarei around e-commerce and website development, all that type of work is actually going to increase. And in fact, later in the document, we talk about how it will. So there's a number of anomalies in the document. And I guess my disappointment is I spent a lot of time going through this document page by page and sentence by sentence, basically. I gave that feedback in detail, and I would have hoped that some at least has been picked up, and in fact, I don't find that it has. And I'm not being just whingy about myself. It's more about the information that was provided, I guess. Just a couple of final comments. When we look at the actions, particularly on stage 1, this is the top of page 44, with the key respond to immediate impacts on key economic sectors, I don't really see in our immediate actions a lot of work with key economic sectors, and yet I'm sure we are doing that. And it would have been really good to have seen that reflected, I guess. But in particular, I think it would have been useful in this final draft of the document to have seen a little bit more input from local intelligence, including from the intelligence I know our staff are picking up, and having that reflected in the document. So if we have an opportunity to do any of that, input some of that into the final document, that would be great. And if not, then I really, really hope it's going to come through in the action plan. And if I can just make a final comment about the work that our Chief Executive can do on editing, on page 47, can we please make sure that Papakāinga is spelt right? Really, in this day and age, I don't think we should be making those sort of mistakes. So I don't mean to be, I'm trying to be constructively critical. I'm not meaning to be negative and picky, but I think with a document like this, which is so important, we really need to get information that aligns and is appropriate to our district, rather than just relying on quantitative information. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cutforth. Before I go to Councillor Cockerillo, I just want to very quickly respond to that, and thank you for the rigour that you put in as an elected member into reviewing documents, and I agree with your comments. And a strategy is, again, a moment in time. I think the important part of the work plan ahead will be to ensure that the actions that are included in the various stages are acted on and reported to us in reference to a strategy. But I agree that perhaps it does give us an opportunity to input some updated data. When you print an agenda a number of days ahead of time, it can be delayed in its response. So thank you for that input. Councillor Cottillo.
Could I just Sorry.
Yes.
Just a question for staff. On top page 46, under stage 2 recovery, in 2.3, in our draft document, we had a number of comments around the Hatia Loop, increasing footpaths, cycleways and shared paths. And I note that that's one of the changes that has been made, and that information has come out of that point 2.3. I just wondered what the reasoning was for that.
Can I hand to Rob or Alison to respond to that one?
Sorry, I just want to double check I'm on the right page. So we're on page 46.
Top page 46.
The one that says prioritise central government funding opportunities?
Yes.
Yeah. What we've tried to do is make it generic rather than specific, because government's criteria are not exactly clear at the moment, so we tried to make it very generic.
I think footpaths, cycleways and shared paths are quite generic, and I would really ask if we could actually have that put back in the document. If we're going to have placemaking is probably not enough to actually cover those particular items. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cutforth. Councillor Cockerillo.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Cutforth has brought up a lot of the things I was going to bring up, but I just have a couple of questions before I go into a statement. My first thing is, how are we planning to measure our success?
I'll hand you over to Rob for that one.
Each point will have a different measurement. Not all of them have been worked through at this stage. Please bear in mind that this was done over a matter of 2 or 3 days when it's about 6 weeks' work. So we don't have all the details around that, but we will work on measures. Obviously, there are some generic measures that we can use, like unemployment's there and GDP and things like that. So there's those sorts of things. But for some of our more specific actions, we'll have to develop measures as this goes along. So one of the points that I would like to make to councillors is, because this is moving so quickly and literally 4 days later things are different, we are building the plane while we are flying it. And we need to be quite flexible about that. That's just the reality of the situation we're in. Hopefully that will stabilise shortly. But at this stage, things are out of date within days, and we are working through, and it's not a detail for measures, it's a really important thing, but we haven't got there yet for some of them.
I appreciate that, Rob, and I do understand that as the documents are moving, or as time's moving on, the document will actually hopefully have some flexibility in it to allow for that. The other question was more in relation to central government. When the document refers to central government, will this also include Northland Inc.?
So, through you, Madam Chair, Northland Inc. is a local government CCO. So, but Northland Inc. does funnel a lot of central government funding. So I presume that's what you're speaking about. Yeah. So yeah, Northland Inc. we are working quite closely with Northland Inc. And have been, well, since prior to lockdown, but certainly extensively during lockdown. And we are. Today's obviously budget day. We should get a better idea of what central government support, if any, will be available after today, and then we can move to put in our applications or take advantage of that support.
Yeah, the reason why I'm asking about the Northland Inc. it's just the document hasn't actually referred to Northland Inc. being in there, when I know that we are working with them quite clearly and quite closely. One of the other questions was more. The document talks a lot about hapu, but yet it misses out the Indian community, the Chinese community, which are actually quite a large percentage of Whangarei's base. I'm assuming that this isn't an oversight. We have actually included them in there. We just haven't listed them. Is that correct?
Yes. I can't remember the details, sorry, Councillor, but I am aware that our community development people are working across the board with a variety of groups, and I would expect that, and I'll confirm this afterwards, that we've got we'll be working with those communities.
Yeah, and through you, Madam Chair, I do have to stress that the staff have done an amazing job to get all this and bring it all together in such a short space in time. And Councillor Cutforth has already highlighted on page 21, 23, whichever numbering you want to go to, about employment. The document says it's 4.5. According to Dr. Shane Reddy yesterday, it was on 10.7 for Whangarei. So there is a lot of things in the document which should be changing at this present moment. I am also very thankful that the staff have included the hospital as being one of the major things that needs to be upgraded within Whangarei and Northland, because that's one of the biggest aspects or biggest employers in Northland, and that is our medical industry. And if we're going to have another incident like this, we need to have a hospital which is not dated 1950s, but maybe dated 2020s. And look, again, I just say well done to the staff, well done to pulling it all together. I do hope that there is some flexibility within the document to allow changes to happen, and even though it's not listed there, that everyone is included.
Thank you, Councillor Cockerillo. Councillor Peters, I saw you had your hand up. You have spoken. Do you have a question?
I do. It's a little bit rhetorical, but it is a question. I noticed on page 45, looking at the top, reducing processing timeframes for resource consents and building resource consents. Does that include increasing resourcing to that area?
Rob, I'll hand that to you.
Through you, Madam Chair. No, what we are expecting is that there will be a reduction in these consents. You'll be aware that we, because we've cut the personnel budget fairly severely, we don't have enough space to add staff to the organisation. So what we'll be doing is looking again at processes. We're also working quite hard with the government to try and influence some of the rules that are going on at the moment, because while I know everyone thinks it's the council who slows things down, the council staff operate according to a very tight set of rules, and in the building area in particular there is very little flexibility. So we're going to be advocating to government to provide us with a bit more flexibility. The classic example I think I've said to some councillors is the last audit meeting I was in, we got a 5-minute lecture about not calibrating our thermometer often enough for the water temperatures, and one of my senior building inspectors said in the old day we could put our hands under the hot water and use that as a calibration. So it's this trying to move back to those sorts of things which were perfectly sensible and reasonable, but aren't allowed under some of the current systems.
Thank you, Rob. That's a very encouraging answer.
Thank you, Councillor Peters. Any other councillors wish to speak to this item? Councillor Martin, you have spoken. Do you have a question? Need your microphone on, Councillor Martin.
I was talking to I asked him how many of the people going onto the dole were people who've returned from overseas and have gone onto the dole, onto the benefit, so that they can fund it while they have to stay here. Because I know several people, got one here, and their intention is most likely to go back overseas again once it's lifted. And I just wonder if they keep any record of that kind of thing, and whether it would be helpful to know that.
Rob, are you aware of that data?
Short answer is I don't know. I can ask MSD if they collect that data or not. So I'm happy to do that and come back to councillors.
Just before I hand to Councillor Innes for a right of reply, I just want to make a comment around the strategy, and thank you for your... Oh, sorry, I apologise. Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd just like to tell Toko Phil and the two Gregs, particularly the fact now that we've got a pretty good platform to work through. Well, I'd call it probably better than pretty good. The response time and the active participation of our staff setting all this up has just been quite amazing, really. Now, let's hope that we keep our foot on the gas, so to speak, and this carries on through to shovel-ready projects and anything else that we can possibly slip through into this endeavour and get people back working. And just as an aside, you will find that in the transport and logistics side of things, those figures are probably very, very incorrect. You try and hire a Class 5 driver at the moment and you'll probably be pushing it uphill with a pitchfork. But that's all I've got to say. Thank you to the staff, and let's keep at it.
Thank you, Councillor Reid. So just, endorsing the feedback that we've got today from the elected members to thank the staff to bring the document together. I think it is a really valid point that has been made around the moment in time and how we need to be refreshing this. And I would imagine that because the strategy has some long-term impacts, we'll be getting reports back on how the actions are being the impact that those actions are having in each of the stages as we restart, recover and reset. So I will hand over to Councillor Innes for a right of reply, and then I'll put the motion.
Good. Thank you, Your Worship. Look, I would really want to stress that when we look at a strategy, it's not about a document. It's about a process going forward as well. The document is just a point in time, and part of the strategy really is to have a strong monitoring program, and I know that Councillor Peters and Cutforth have actually raised that. Rob, I see that having that monitoring capability within the organisation is absolutely critical going forward. Part of that is also looking at the initiatives that we're taking and the effectiveness of them. So I think that that's a key aspect that we need as an organisation going forward. And the reset, and we look towards central government, and a number of councillors have raised that. It's really important for us to be totally on our toes as it relates to the infrastructure projects, because that will be part of the reset coming out. And finally, just picking up on Councillor Holz's comments in terms of strengthening Maori partnerships, I'm hopeful that we can progress that further in the discussions that we're currently having. Thank you, Your Worship. That's all from me.
The right of reply has been had. I will put that motion. Those in favour, please raise your hands. That's unanimous. Thank you, and carried. We'll move to item 5.2, the COVID-19 relief package. We have recommendations on page 53 of the agenda, the printed agenda. Do I have a mover for the recommendations? And I'll read them. Councillor Peters had her hand up. I'll read the recommendations. That the Council, 1, endorses a council relief package totalling $3 million for inclusion in the proposed 2020-21 annual plan. The total amount will be allocated to A, community groups, 900,000, B, business support through district development, 1,350,000, and C, ratepayer report, 750,000. So that's recommendation has been moved by Councillor Peters. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Benny has seconded the motion. Councillor Peters, I'll hand over to you.
This is a really important step that the Council's taking in supporting in a balanced way the community, the businesses of the district, and also recognising that ratepayers are going to need support. So that balance is really important, and also that the workers in the council have actually done a lot of work behind the scenes to integrate this with the long-term potential, the short-term plan, the annual plan. So I am very happy to endorse this. I particularly am interested in the look that it has, the emphasis it has on inner city living and the redo of the centre of the city. Thank you, work.
Thank you, Councillor Peters. Councillor Benny. Sorry, Councillor Benny.
Yes, I was originally a little bit critical of the response for business, and in particular the 1.35 million supported for business included 400,000 for 420,000 for investigating inner city centre redevelopment and another 300,000 for partnership and support through Northland. I queried those figures, and I'm really happy with the response. I got a response this morning, you'll be aware, from Tony Collins, and these are additional. This is additional work being put into those areas. So I'm really happy with the response. I really like the rent relief given to commercial tenants for the council. I would love to see support for those commercial tenants who don't have the council as their landlord, but that is not our area. I'm hoping that there's some love from the budget today for those people. I'm still a little bit concerned for a business in, say, Waipu or Kamo, a retail business, as to what do they specifically get from this package. And the answer is it's a month's rates holiday. So there is a concern of that, but I have queried those figures, and I'm really happy with the response from Council. I'm really happy that the Council is addressing those areas, and we're pumping the money into the development rather than providing direct cash support. And just a query on page, sorry, I'm using my phone. So on page 53, the background, the community support for business and ratepayer support, the percentages go to 95% instead of 100. I take it that that's a mistake, or there may be a 5% gone somewhere else.
Thank you. I noted that, and it is corrected elsewhere in the agenda. So I think it might have just been a little typo at the beginning of the agenda. So, councillors, who else wishes? I see Councillor Cutforth, Hulse, Murphy. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I figured that somebody was creaming 5% off just because they've been working so hard or something. I don't know. I think it's an elegant response. Actually, I think it's a really nicely balanced response. I particularly wanted to thank the fact that there's some money there, some funding there for directed support under the community funding, where we can actually identify organisations who we think have been doing a really good job, and we can approach them, so we can be quite proactive about it. And I also really like the fact that we are looking at offsetting the licence fees for the hospitality industry. I think that's, again, an elegant way of handling that particular issue. I mean, elegant is, but it's a good way of handling it, rather than getting into a whole debate about do we give them money off their rates or whatever. I just had one small question, which is around the support for district promotion. When we discussed this earlier, we were talking about the fact that there are a number of different Facebook pages, I think, that have sprung up to really support local business, and Whangarei Love It Here continues on, and they were going to, I think, look at whether we could somehow bring them under that umbrella. And I just wondered, perhaps from Rob or from somebody, what the upshot is of that discussion, because I note that we've made a sort of more generic comment than we had in the original work I was looking at, where we had identified one particular page, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cutforth. Rob, do you have a response, or there may be somebody else who can update us?
If Tony's available, he can probably provide more detail, but I'm happy to respond if he's not.
Tony is available.
You might need to unmute your mic, Tony. Tony Collins, love to hear from you. Silence ensues. Rob, you're going to have to be a stand-in for Tony.
So there are links between all those Facebook pages, as far as I'm aware, and they are intended to support each other. And I think one of the good things that we've had coming out of this is a lot of mutual support. A lot of our work has been working through the economic work stream of the Social Wellbeing Governance Group, which includes all agencies, including Northern Inca and the Chamber of Commerce. So that's all part of this. But there's also those I suppose, organic and spontaneous things that have popped out, and the team are working with them as well. Those groups have their independence and will want to do their own thing, but we can coordinate.
I have Tony on the line now. He couldn't get into the meeting because there weren't enough slots, but I think the question's probably been answered, has it not?
Yes, thank you, Alison.
Okay.
And Councillor Hulse.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. At this stage, I was going to work in an amendment to the motion, but I've decided not to do that. But I want to speak one in favour of the package. I think it's a great package, and it's one that I think will fit nicely into our communities. The question I've got is, though, it's about allocation of the funds. And this $3 million package has all come from ratepayer money, and the councillors are responsible for the spend of ratepayers' money. Now, there's no delegated authority in this documentation at all. There's no delegated authority to staff to spend this money, so therefore it'd have to come back through councillors. My question is, and what I'd like to see on the next council agenda is, how are we going to have the fund distributed? Because we've recently had the grants allocation go through council that caused a bit of dismay, and we don't want to go through that again. So in this whole agenda item, there's no mention of who's responsible for the payment of these funds. So I'm requesting that the next council has an agenda item on it, clearly defining who's going to distribute the allocation of the funds, whether it be a combination of staff and councillors. And obviously, Councillor Benny, it's part of the Councillor Benny, the chair of the community development place, and I think this is where it fits. But I think I'd like to see a combination of councillors and staff in this, because it's where we've got to join together, be in unison going forward, and make sure the allocations are totally fair and transparent. And so that's what I'd like to. That's my request. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Holt. I will challenge your comment around who's got the mic. Thank you. Around delegations, because our staff members do have delegation to do this, but I agree with you around any grants that are to be allocated. It will go through the correct processes, which is through the Community Development Committee. That is a separate process, but good point. But I'm confident that the allocation of the package, where there is a delegation, it will be appropriately used, and where funds specifically for grant funding will go through the correct process through the committee. So thank you for that. Next I had Councillor Murphy.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's a great package, and it's great that we can provide that $3 million. Of course, as Councillor Hull said, it is ratepayer money coming back, but it's going to be coming out to community and businesses. I just had a question. With the $300,000 that we are proposing to provide to the business community, $300,000 to Northland Inc., they have provided a fantastic service, and I know that we have been collaborating with them in writing our strategy and in providing this fund. But I'm just wondering, that $300,000, is that mostly for admin support, or are small businesses actually going to be able to apply to Northland Inc. for grants of some of that money? Because it is a large chunk of money, $300,000. I wouldn't like to see that all just tied up in, kind of admin and, paying someone at Northland Inc. to be making phone calls. It would be great to know that some of that money will be available through application to go back out to small businesses. Can I just have some clarification on how that $300,000 will be spent, please?
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. Rob, that information from Tony may be helpful.
Yes, if Tony is available now, that would be
Tony is available on the telephone. Can you hear him? Tony, can you speak? Tony, can you speak?
Yeah.
Can you hear him?
Yes, thank you.
Tony?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, yeah. So it's going to be a combination. I'm speaking. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Cool. So what it's doing is basically it's an extension of the resources that we currently provide to Northland Inc. It's going to be a combination. I'm speaking. What it will entail doing is allow us to use Jade Williams plus additional resources to help give that direct thing.
Okay. Yeah, it's quite hard to hear you there, Tony, but it will be really good. I think we just need to have a bit more conversation as soon as we can, just to talk through the detail and just find out exactly what else that fund can support to businesses, because I think for me that's the priority, that we get as much money as we can actually out there. And so while I appreciate the job that Northland Inc. is doing, for me it's critical to spend that as much of that money is pumped back out to our small businesses. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. Councillor Cockerillo.
Right, there we go. Just trying to get unmuted. Thank you, Worship. Look, Councillor Holtz raised a question there, and it brought me back to my original question I asked on the previous motion. With the funds that have been allocated, will Council be measuring and monitoring the effects of this funding?
Rob's nodding his head. Do you want to respond to that one, Rob?
Yeah, obviously we have to account for any funds because it is public money, and we will need to measure that. It's obviously standard practice when we're using other people's money and ratepayer money that we account for it. So we will be looking at that. As I say, we haven't got all the mechanisms up for measuring it, and some of the measures probably won't be ideal because this has been created in a hurry. But it's a bit like the situation that the government's in at the moment. We're working on a high trust model and doing the best we can, and we will measure the best we can.
Okay, and thank you for that, Rob, and Your Worship. With one of the other things that Councillor Cutforth raised in relation to support for district, I know 50,000 in the grand scheme of things is quite little, but I'm just more curious, will this allow local businesses to bid for this work, or is this all done internally?
Rob, do you have a response for that one?
So just with this whole process, we don't have the ability to set up new systems and processes and put new staff on board and all that sort of thing. So what we will be doing is using our existing channels, and of course local businesses are involved in our existing channels for the district promotion work. So yes, but what we have done is enhanced what we currently have, rather than creating new things, simply because if we create something new, we then have to set up accountability structures around it, we have to staff it and coordinate it and all those sorts of things, and we just don't have the people to do that.
And again, I do appreciate what Rob's saying there, and my concern more comes about from the fact that we had such controversy about the change in the logo and the process that went through, so I'm just more quite conscious of when we say a budget item, we can actually fully clearly measure it and also say, this is the effects that it's actually having, or the roll-on effects it's having, rather than trying to, in better words that could be said, than someone putting it in their pocket. But yeah, again, I'm trying to make sure that we have accountable measures in place. Other than that, I do say again, the staff have put a lot of stuff together. I do hope that there is a little bit of wiggle room amongst these items. And I do hope that when it comes to community funding or community groups, that it does come back to council to get some sort of say over it, or if there is some sort of bidding process for this stone money. Because I would hate to see council turn around and go, oh, because we've been working with this group, this is where the funds are going, rather than actually allowing it open for all the community to actually apply for the funding.
Thank you, Councillor Cockerillo. Councillor Cooper, did I see your hand up before?
No, Your Worship, I was merely reflecting on the conversation as it unfolded.
Thank you. Councillor Innes.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to really comment on the balance, I think that it's well struck between the ability to respond to requests, and part of that does relate to cash flow situations that we're able to assist in. The other part, of course, is being able to influence change, and actually the number of tools that we have to do that are quite substantial. So I'm pleased to see district development involved in that. But I also realise that $3 million, and there has been a substantial amount of funding taken out of staff budgets. So I'm mindful that we'll all be wanting to do more with less. So it really comes back to the culture that we're trying to encourage, and that's one really of engagement as council, as groups and council, and one going forward in a more positive way. So that's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Innes. Councillor Deeming.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just finding my way around the computer there. I really appreciate this package, totally support it, full of admiration for the speed with which the staff put it together for the immediate response, and looking forward to the medium and long-term response as well. I just have one comment, plea. Please, when we're publishing announcements that are intended to advise and assist the public, please could we put them out in black and white with bullet points, not pale green on white, because I couldn't read them, several of the other councillors couldn't read them, and the problem is that the public just quickly glance over them and think, oh, can't be bothered reading that. Whereas if it's an in-your-face, black and white, with bullet points, then it gets the attention that it deserves. Thanks to Councillor Martin, I actually got a copy of the last rates advice in black and white and sent that to my ratepayer groups, because I'm quite sure that many people didn't read the pale green on white. So thank you. Look forward to that.
Thank you for that feedback, Councillor Deeming. Any other councillors wish to speak? Just before I hand back to Councillor Peters, I would like to also talk about the balance that's been struck for each of the sectors in between the incentive and relief and the reactive and proactive nature, and for each of those sectors that we've struck a different balance, which I think is really appropriate. So the funding that's available for our community, I really enjoy that the diagram that shows that local government doesn't create financial wealth. It receives a portion of our community's wealth, transforms it into value and returns it to them. This is a clear example of how we are making that the cycle of the ratepayer funding go through and create some recovery in wealth from out of the COVID-19 impacts. So I think the description by Councillor Cutforth of an elegant response is actually a really appropriate term for this relief package. So I'll hand back to Councillor Peters for her right of reply.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think that over the period, we as a community have worked together, the council and a lot of the elements of our community, and this is building on that kotahitanga, that working together. And I think that that is the beginning of a period where we all where this financial piece and the accountable will be put out of our ways through work that we have. I want to run to a couple of points. The culture of slave about Elephant Inc. And then there's the object of the business towards business was very successful in what it did, and that may be some of the areas that they'll be expanding on with this money, I hope. And other than that, I'm also towards the disposition. I think that it's very important to promote as a district And in our relationship with Northland Inc. and the Northland Chamber of Commerce, we need to look at Taitoku as a whole. So, yeah, thank you very much for this, for all the work that's done. It is an elegant response.
Thank you, Councillor Peters. It was unfortunate that your sound quality was not great in that, but I think we got the gist. So the motion has been moved and seconded. I will put that motion. Those in favour, please raise your hands. That's everybody again. Thank you. Carried. Moving to item 5.3, the deliberation and adoption of 2020-21 fees and charges. The recommendations are probably a little long for me to be reading out for everybody to read, but I will cover off the majority of the recommendations so that members of our community can understand what we're going to be discussing. So the recommendations are that Council note the information and submission comments. 2, note that Council is finalising fee relief for those affected by COVID-19 through a grant system which will assist businesses most affected, hospitality. 3, deliberate on the submission of the proposed 2020-21 fees and charges. And then also that following deliberations, so I'm going to do the 2 parts. There's the first part, and then we'll be doing to deliver on the submission. Some of the version of the day. Now, we'll work needs to be accounting. My microphone is, I have a technical problem. I will need help. Okay, well that's inconsistent. I don't know what you heard, so I'll start back at the beginning. Say that again, Tricia.
It was coming and going, so we lost you for a while, but it came back.
Okay, so the first part of the recommendations on page 97, which are about the submissions, we need to get that portion of it over and done with first. So I need a mover for what we can read is that Council 1, 2 and 3. Do I have a mover for that section of the recommendations, please? Councillor Deeming has moved. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Cockerillo. So, Councillors, this is just to cover off the fact that we did receive a submission to our proposed fees and charges, and we need to deliberate on that submission, and then we'll move into the following portion where we will, if there are no changes required, we'll move into the second part of that. So, Councillor Deeming, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you. I think the item explains itself there. The only submission that we had was from Hospitality New Zealand, and the staff have responded to that submission as set out in the agenda. No need to go right through it. So I have no need to deliberate on it further. I'm quite satisfied with the staff response.
Thank you, Councillor Deeming. Councillor Bini.
I'm just advising that I have an interest in this area. Obviously, at this stage, for the next couple of weeks, I have a business in town which is in hospitality, so I won't be taking any part in the vote on this.
Thank you, Councillor Bini. That will be noted. Any other discussion on the deliberations for the submission that we received? If not, I will put that part of the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hands. Thank you, that is carried. Now we move into the second part. We have deliberated, so there are recommendations that we make no changes to the draft fees and charges as a result of consultation. Also that we note the submitter will be informed of the outcome of their submission, and then that we are adopting the fees and charges which were subject to the special consultative procedure under the Local Government Act listed in Table A below, and it does go through a number of areas: bylaw enforcement, drainage, Food Act, Gambling and Racing Act, Health Act registered premises, Public Places Bylaw, Resource Management Act, rubbish disposal and water supply. The final recommendation is that we authorise the Chief Executive to make any minor amendments, drafting typographical or presentation corrections necessary to the fees and charges, including reference to the previous year's fees. So can I have a mover for those recommendations, please? Councillor Deeming is moving those and Councillor Cutforth is seconding. Any discussion? Councillor Deeming.
Sorry, it took a while. As the only submission we had was Hospitality New Zealand, and the relief that they requested at point 4.2 on page 98 is being addressed in the COVID-19 relief package. We had no other submissions regarding the fees, which was surprising, possibly, but most of them have moved very little. The other fees have been assessed and where necessary amended with the allocation between the exacerbator, who's actually getting the benefit of the fee that's being applied, and the public interest. They've been allocated as fairly as possible. So since we had no objections to it, I have no further comment but to accept the recommendations as outlined in the agenda.
Thank you, Councillor Deeming. Any further discussion? Councillor Cutforth.
Thank you, Worship. Really just a question. Do we send out notification about this to the parties, or is it just information that appears on our website? Thank you.
Are you talking specifically about the submitter who made the submission, or other parties? I'm not quite clear of the question.
I'm speaking about the fees and charges information, whether that is sent out to parties or whether it is just information that appears as of right, if you like, on our website. And then I have a further comment.
Rob, are you able to respond to that question?
No, can I pass that on to Alison? I suspect it just appears on our website. The submitter obviously will get a letter, but I think otherwise it will appear on our website, but I'll just check with Alison.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. Well, in that case, I wonder if partly because of the timing, given that a number of businesses that will be impacted by fees would have been quite busy with dealing with COVID over that time. And so the Hospitality New Zealand submission is sort of a broader submission on behalf, I guess. But I just wonder if we are putting something up on our website, whether we also put a note about the package that we are providing, including the licence fee reduction costs. So that goes alongside it when we put it up. I think that would be really appropriate to do. Thank you.
Getting a nod from the Chief Executive there. I would like to note, councillors, though, that the feedback to our proposed fees and charges were the feedback was the submissions period closed on the 27th of March, so none of the submission period was affected by the COVID period, apart from So just to make that clear, that we weren't trying to consult over the lockdown or anything like that. It was all prior to that. Now I've got Councillor Murphy, then Councillor Peters.
Thank you. Yeah. Of course, we went through our workshopping for this prior to COVID, and back then it was kind of business as usual. I think for me, I just wanted to make a comment. I just wanted to use this as an opportunity to make a comment that next year I think it would be great to see Council really having a conversation about how we can use our fees and charges as more of an incentive to help us reset the way we do things. And this is something that Councillor Innes has always talked about. And I agree with him, that looking, for example, with our building fees and charges, if we want to really incentivise a sustainable building and green building, then there are ways that we can use our fees and charges to encourage people to look at, better energy efficiency in their home design, and just look at the way that things are designed. I know other councils actually have like green building advisors where they work with developers to see those kind of outcomes happen. So I just wanted to make a comment about that. I agree with the comments that Councillor Cutforth made as well about having some information easily available for people. And I think it's been raised already, but it's good that we have, through our COVID relief package, we've got that grant that hospitality can apply to for at least a 25% reduction in fees. So that's really positive. Yes, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. Councillor Peters.
I also want to comment on the fees, and I realise that they are not substantial rises, but I do notice they're rising, and that somehow doesn't go hand in hand with our wanting to encourage more home building. And so that's just a comment, and I realise it's not substantial, but look at the fees have gone up.
Thank you, Councillor Peters. Unfortunately, your sound quality cuts in and out, so I wasn't sure. Had you finished what you wanted to say? Thumbs up if you did. And videos. Thank you, Councillor Peters. Councillor Cockerillo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just on what Councillor Peters has just said, that there's not been much increase. According to page 155, there's a increase of a price there of double. And I'm just curious as to why that one item has doubled, where everything else has been $2 or $3 more.
Could you be specific which fee you're speaking of, Councillor Cockerillo?
Yeah, sure. It's under Gambling and Racing Act. Minimum deposit for up to 7 hours processing time. Current fee is $732. Proposed fee is $1,400.
Can I answer that?
Absolutely.
It's actually not a fee, that's actually a deposit. So the fees have been doubled to reflect more of the cost of the actual application.
So the deposit has increased, but the fee has only risen by $84. Is that correct?
I haven't got it in front of me, but I'm just looking for it now. But the principle is that it's actually only a deposit, it's not actually the fee. And it's the same as we do with the RMA and the building consent areas. We have a deposit, which is an approximate amount that they will be paying for the consent. And if it's any less, we refund it. If it's any more, it's added on top of that.
Anything further, Councillor Cockerillo?
No, that's all good. I'm not a fan for increases of fees anyway, but that's me.
Councillor Cooper, then Councillor Hulse. Councillor Cooper, we can't hear you.
Okay, thank you very much. Just having trouble getting onto the microphone, but we're there. I find myself agreeing with Councillor Murphy, which is something that's always, helpful. And in that the fees that we have can be a genuine tool in promoting growth in our district, and I do feel it's something that we have to look at. I guess I would note that while the increases are small, as someone who has been through the process of using the consenting system in the council a reasonable amount, you often feel like it's death by 1,000 cuts. And I would like to think that we can promote consistency and efficiency in the consulting system, and I have talked to Alison about this. And again, I think it comes back to what Councillor Cockerillo said before, and again, it's a happy time when I agree with Councillor Cockerillo about the monitoring of our success or otherwise in these things, and that I do believe we say in our strategy that we're going to reset and so on, that we're going to lift our efficiency and so on and so forth. It would be nice to think that we can establish a baseline. For instance, how many days is it taking to go through a building consent at the moment? when you take into account the time set aside where the consent is suspended and now, and how much have we been able to shift that when it comes to down the track, so we can measure our efficiency gains. So while I do support the motion, I very much would like us to keep in mind that we must deliver value for money, that they do add up, these fees, and that it is an area of frustration for many people who are trying to do business in the community.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Councillor Hull.
Thank you, Your Worship. And generally I'll be all over this and seeking out where we've made reduction in some of the fees and charges, as I have done year on year. I think the word efficiency comes to mind quite often when you're looking at fees and charges. But one I have difficulty with in this is on page 145, where we're looking at a 40% increase in the RMA charge. And where the applicant now has got to pay $8,000 up front before we start a public consultation process. Now, one, I'd like to know whether that's a straight drop down from the government, whether it changes the RMA, or two, did we have imposed that within house? But anything over 40% is anything over 2% at the moment is excessive, but 40% is right off the scale. So I'd like an explanation around that, please.
Can I answer that question? It's the same as the principle I was describing before. It's actually just a deposit, and the amounts have been increased to more closely reflect the cost of actually going through that process. So before they were being charged less of a deposit but had more to pay at the end of the process. So this is just really in line with the true cost of the application. It's not actually put it up. It's only been put up by the cost of living. Sorry, I'm just here. It is in front of me now. Anyway, that's the answer to the question. It's actually a deposit again. It's not actually the fee that's been increased.
Yeah. But, Your Worship, what I'd like to comment on that comment is it just goes straight against what the two previous councillors have spoken about, Councillor Murphy and Councillor Cooper. We need to incentivise development. We want to make sure they work in harmony with us, and straight away we throw the brickbats at them and say, well, front up with your money first before we do any work. And that's not a good, positive way of doing business. I'd like to see that some more work done around that, please. But I will be voting for the fees and charges because we need this money.
Thank you, Councillor Hulse. Any other councillors wishing to speak to this? Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll have to put two hands up next time. You seem to be having a bit of an issue catching one finger. I've done a bit of research through this, and I think the vast bulk of the charges are minimal increases. We live in a day and age where nothing stays the same, as we've seen in the last few months. I'm reasonably comfortable with it. I don't think anyone knows better than me the intricacies, we'll call it, of applying for building permits and consents and bits and pieces. I've learnt quite a bit over the last 12 to 15 months. And I pretty much endorse what's in here. But while we're charging a little more, hopefully we're going to be a little more proactive and a little more assisting with applicants for resource consents and building permits. And yeah, I would really appreciate it if we took that on board, holtus boltus.
Thank you, Councillor Reid. Councillor Innes.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to raise that whole question of incentivisation in terms of the RMA. I think that it has to be clearly looked at in terms of the benefit that's provided, the public benefit, if there is incentivisation. I go back to Councillor Hulse's question there related to public notification. I know that I'm a representative from the Whangarei Heads Ward. There has been a lot of discussion on requiring public notification so everybody can comment on any development proposal. That now comes at a cost of $10,000 to the applicant. It seems to me that dealing with these issues are really a district plan issue and policy in the district plan. So we need to be thinking about the fees, the incentivisation of them when we're drawing up the district plan would be my comment. And just raising also the pre-application hearings, Councillor Reid, it's important to get into the room as early as possible to work through some of these things. So that's it from me.
Thank you, Councillor Innes. Any other councillors wishing to speak? I will also be supporting the motion, noting, of course, in our budgets that we will have a probably quite significant drop in income from some of these areas through the impact of COVID-19. So that has no impact, of course, on the setting of the fees, but it does impact on our future for income from fees and charges. I would also like to note that the rubbish disposal fees have not moved at all, that we've managed to hold the rubbish bag fees and all of the associated charges at our transfer stations. So I think that's something positive that our community can be pleased about. We've done that for a number of years in a row now. So I don't have any other further things to say, but Councillor Deeming, you were the mover. Do you want a right of reply?
Thank you. I would just like to clarify that legislation requires that the fees cover actual costs and don't include any profit, and that is a very strong point that the auditors monitor very closely. Using fees and charges as an incentive is quite difficult. I think our best response there is actually to continue to lobby government to decrease some of the impositions that they apply. Because going back to Rob and the hot water incident, that is the sort of issue that has been passed down to councils to deal with. And all of those little issues add to the costs. And then the costs have to be passed on to the applicant. But the costs aren't passed on in order to make a profit for council. That's definitely legislated against. And council's role is to figure out how much of the benefit is a benefit to the exacerbator or the user and how much is actually a public benefit, and equate the cost between the two. So the cost remains the same. So any incentive that is given to the applicant has to be paid for out of general rates or by some other means. So those are the issues that we need to grapple with if we think about using fees and charges as an incentive to development or progress or whatever. And we also have to bear in mind that generally the applicant gains the greater benefit from their application. If we could streamline the red tape that they have to go through, man, I would be the most pleased person, because to take a year to do a simple boundary change, but probably most of that issue is not with council either, it's with the external parties that you're dealing with as well, and council bears the brunt of the length of time that it takes. So I just wanted to speak to just clarify how the fees are actually accounted for. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Deeming. The right of reply has been had. I'll put that motion, those motions. Those in favour, please raise your hands. And thank you. That's everybody in noting that Councillor Benny had abstained. That's carried. Councillors, I am sorry, Councillor Cockerello, you were having a hand up. Were you voting
against, Your Worship?
I apologise, I didn't spot that. So Councillor Cockerello has voted against and Councillor Benny abstained. It is carried. Councillors, it's now 10:24. I'm going to propose that we take a 16-minute break. So that means I would like to come to adjourn from now to 10:40. So back at 10:40 to reconvene the meeting, and we will see you then. Thank you, everybody.